Welcome, everyone. I call this meeting to order for October 8th, 2024, the council meeting at 6, call it to order at 6 p.m. This meeting will be held in a hybrid manner where members of council, staff, and the public can participate electronically. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available on the township website. Notice is hereby provided that under the authority of the Municipal Act 2001 and in accordance with Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, that all information attained is considered part of the public record. All rules apply to the meeting as if everyone is attending in person, and if there's a problem with the technology impacting the proceedings of the meeting may be recessed. So at this time, I would ask everyone to rise that can for the national anthem. Are there any declarations this evening? Being none, there was no closed session. There are no presentations or statutory meetings. So first is open forum. The first 15 minutes of the meeting has been set aside for open forum. Any individual may address council regarding an item on the agenda, excluding matters under the statutory public section of the same agenda. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. Anyone wishing to speak can register in advance with the clerk's division or raise their hand, and if participating virtually, use the raised hand feature in Zoom. Today, we don't have any pre-registered speakers, so I will go to the chambers first and then to Zoom, seeing if there is anyone that wishes to speak on this. Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to speak under open forum this evening? Being none? Yes. Yes. Okay, we'll just take a quick 5-minute recess. Is there any additional information you wish to present?
I do have a couple of additions, Your Worship, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. First of all, I apologize. It appears that a small section of the report is missing at the end of the background and analysis section with respect to the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. My apologies. That paragraph should outline that although we were unsuccessful in the first round of application, staff recommends submitting the same project to round 2 because it's the project that best aligns to the objectives of the program. So that project is the Amherstview Water Pollution Control Plant peak flow equalization and headworks upgrades, which has a budget of $4.3 million. So my apologies for that. And then I just want to provide a little bit of a clarification on the section that discusses the Community Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Fund. So staff has reached out to staff from the province and understands that the two streams are reviewed independent from one another. But I wanted to clarify that the work that's contemplated under Stream 1, which is the lower cost program, is included in the Stream 2 project as it's presented for your consideration. So put another way, the pad, boards, and glass that are contemplated under the Stream 1 project are included in the $15.8 million work plan identified for the Stream 2 application. So if we are to apply to both streams as is recommended, and we're successful under both streams, we would need to decline the Stream 1 funding and accept the Stream 2 funding only. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everyone. And we'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Great procedure a little bit on this one, just because pretty significant, and there may be some questions. So I'll take questions for clarification before we take the motion, just to make sure that everyone's clear before a motion will come to on. So are there any questions at this time? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through just on the last with there, Ms. Campbell, the splitting of Stream 1 and 2, is there any advantage into dropping the piece from Stream 2 that would apply to Stream 1 if they're independent of each other in terms of evaluation?
So through the mayor, we could do that. So it would be a reduction of a. Your mic's on hold. Sorry. So through the mayor, we could look at doing that. It would be a reduction of about $1.5 million from the ask under Stream 2. It's just the question of what's likely to be successful. The project on the whole does align very well to the objectives of the Stream 2 program, which include, things like competition ready facilities, accessibility, like a number of things that the project really focuses in on for the Stream 2 application. So I wouldn't want to remove it from Stream 2 and then not be successful in Stream 1 and lose out on the potential funding associated with that work.
Fair enough.
Yes.
And just a couple more to the mayor. The Amherstview reconstruction project, County Road 6, is that how does that play, I guess, with Amherstview West? Is it totally has nothing to do with it in terms of what we would have to do in the Amherstview West project?
Through the mayor, I will attempt to answer this, and maybe the director of economic growth and community development services can support if need be. But this is work that is necessitated by the eventual development of the Amherstview West secondary plan in part, specifically the intersection improvements. It also includes associated technologies pathways that are planned to support the existing lands on the west end of Amherstview, but also the lands that are to come online soon. This work, I believe, has been held a little bit while the secondary plan work was being contemplated, so that we could fully understand what was being, proposed by the planning and engineering teams working on the project. Before putting any money into that section, so the county was holding on to their project before putting any money into that section for redevelopment to wait and see what the outcomes of the secondary plan would be.
Last one, I promise, through the mayor again. Just the green inclusive community building. So do we have nothing right now that we're ready for to do? Is that why we're not maybe that one?
Again, through the mayor, that's the funding that the federal government is granting to us to support the WJ Henderson renewal project. So this is a second round of that same funding program. It's a very involved application process that includes energy modeling and a whole bunch of other things. And so staff's recommendation is not that we don't have something that might align to the program objectives, but we're not likely to be successful a second time. And so to spend that much time on this very involved application is probably not in our best interest.
That's important. Just the last question to the mayor. The previous program that was rejected that is going back in now. Have there been changes made to that, or is it just that aligns more with what the government's saying now in the second round?
Through the mayor once more. The objectives of the program have not changed, and the work plan for the project have not changed. We just still feel that it's the project that best aligns to the program goals of everything that we have that's in the budget. And there wasn't another project that felt like it really aligned with the program objectives.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, I do have one. Under stream 2, the max is 10 million per project. But it could go up to 70% for municipalities under 20%. So is it possible for the township to state a case to go up to like 63% or under the 20,000? And that would give us, we would almost maximize the $10 million limit. It would put us around 9.9, just shy of 10 million. I wasn't sure if that was really an option or if it's better to leave it clean when the application goes in and stick with the recommendation.
Thanks for the question, Your Worship. So the funding program speaks about unique and exceptional circumstances where they may consider a provincial contribution of up to 70% of eligible project costs. For municipalities with a population of less than 20,000. So I think if council felt that the project would be considered unique and exceptional circumstances, then certainly we can look to making that larger step up direction.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation before us in the report. Is there someone who wishes to make a motion? Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that the Republic of Corporate Services Strategy and Innovation Department to incorporate 2024 fall 2024 funding opportunity received, and that the township submit an application to the Housing Enabling Core Infrastructure Fund in partnership with Lennox Niagara County for the redevelopment of County Road 6 between Highway 33 and County Road 23. Staff submit an application to Community Sport and Recreation Infrastructure on Stream 1 for the WJ Henderson Center Renewal Project for the arena floors, glass and pad only, and to Stream 2 for the WJ Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Project in entirety. And that staff submit an application to the Housing Enabling Water Water Systems Fund Round Two for the Air View WPCP peak flow equalization and headworks upgrade.
So moved. Do we have a second? Deputy Mayor Tom. Mover, any comments?
None other than obviously you want to take advantage of any government programs that may help us to alleviate some of the burdens on our taxpayer and four reasonable projects, I think.
Seconder?
Really, my thanks to staff for being able to report and that our staff have very good reputation for grant application, so I hope they're successful.
Thank you. Other members of council? Seeing none, I do would like to thank staff for interpreting and attending meetings to make sure that our applications would be full and well received. I think it's very viable projects. And I'm really hoping that we are successful. The WJ Henderson Recreation Center can certainly use a boost from the provincial level as well. That we'll no doubt be having a conversation with the representatives at that level to make sure that he's aware it's going. With that, back to the move to the final. Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion this evening from the council? Seeing none? Any direct motions this evening? Seeing none? Consent agenda. The routine items are all lumped together under the consent agenda and be dealt with all at once, or an item can be extracted for its own review. So at this time, I would ask, is there any item that wishes to be extracted? Councilor Wilkes.
I absolutely extract item 14.1, the provincial planning statement 2024.
Thank you. 14.1 will be extracted. Any other items to be extracted? If not, for the remaining items, there is a recommendation there in the agenda. Is there someone that would like to make a motion for the remaining items on consent agenda? Councilor Paul.
I would move that all items in the consent agenda except item 14.1 dated October 8, 2024 be approved as presented and necessary action be taken.
So moved. Seconded by Councilor Parks. Any comments from the mover? Seconder, other members? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. 14.1, provincial. Yeah. Provincial planning, 2024. This is quite important. Councilor Willis? And forward.
Thank you, through your honor. As you said, this is quite a document, it's quite dense, and the changes to the provincial policy statement are really important. So I'm hoping that staff can present it and honor those changes.
Staff, are you prepared to provide some information?
Yes, through your worship, I'm happy to outline some of these changes. So I can start by saying the province initiated a review of the provincial policy statement a few years ago and have gone through several rounds of drafts and consultation period. We have submitted comments to the province throughout these iterations of the drafts. And then they finally released a final version of it, which they've now rephrased as the provincial planning statement at the end of August, and it's set to come into effect on October 20th. I would say that in the provincial planning statement, basically it's outlining provincial direction in regards to land use planning that we have to follow. As of October 20th, all planning decisions are required to be consistent with the provincial planning statement, regardless of whether our official plans or zoning bylaws are updated or not. I would say that some of the, probably one of the biggest changes that's been made to it is it's consolidated the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe with the provincial policy statement.
So that's not a huge impact, for us, more for the GTA municipalities, that this growth plan, had very specific density targets, employment population, forecasts that they had to, abide by. And, so it was a very dictated provincial plan for those municipalities. And some of those, so the revised version now in the consolidation of those has now, created a lot more flexible policies out in the GTA, not using the growth plan anymore. So not much of an impact on us, but that was a huge piece of this exercise. In regards to changes that more have an impact on us, and overall the policy statement, like many of the different legislation changes and the policies undertaken over the last few years, is very housing supply focused, some more increased flexibility in policies to help provide additional housing opportunities. So to get into some of the more specific pieces, population employment growth forecasts are to be based on the Ministry of Finance projections. We had been concerned with this, which we outlined to the province, because the Ministry of Finance projections are at like our regional level. They don't go down to the local municipality. They also don't have much in regards to employment projections. It's more population based. However, in revised versions of the most recent version, the province has included a policy that these projections can be modified. So we see this more as working as when we do our next official plan review. We have an economist review our growth projections, and they have to bring down those Ministry of Finance projections down to our levels. So there is some additional flexibility now in policies. The time horizon, so that's another significant change. So there's always been a time horizon in the provincial policy statement in regards to how long municipalities have to plan for growth. So typically, it was before it was up to 20 years. So now it's at least 20 years, but no more than 30. So, there's an additional 10 years that municipalities can provide for additional land supply, if they wanted to explore that option. Other significant changes, I'd say there were changes in previous drafts where they were proposing to remove minimum targets for affordable housing targets. There was a lot of backlash from a lot of municipalities on that, and so that's been reinstated in the final draft. So we have to provide targets for housing that's affordable to low and moderate income households, and that consists of people who their income would be in the lowest 60% of the income distribution for whatever municipality they're in. So in regards to doing those, when we do our official plan comprehensive review, we work working closely with the county on that because they're the affordable housing service provider. Different other pieces is there's additional housing supply opportunities, and that the PPS has always required us to facilitate and permit residential intensification. It's now also being encouraged as part of that municipalities also look at areas that may have underutilized commercial plazas or different shopping plazas or institutional sites that are maybe vacant, that we look to those to convert them to potential to increase housing supply and allow them to convert it to residential. So we would explore that again as part of our official plan comprehensive review, but I think we look at it more from a mixed use perspective, as opposed to just taking commercial lands out and making them residential. But there may be some opportunities where we would have a mixed use development, say for example, or allowing some residential to be mixed above or so on. Settlement areas and boundary expansions is a significant change. The one thing that's happened is there were a lot of requirements in the previous provincial policy statement that required certain things to only be done during a municipal comprehensive review. So essentially, this would be what we do during our official plan comprehensive review that had specific requirements outlined in the PPS on what this is. So planning for, doing a review of your population, employment forecasts, when determining what your settlement boundaries are, you have to justify that. There is very specific criteria on how to justify if you were to expand a boundary. And it could only be done during a comprehensive review, except for under very limited circumstances. This has been changed now where municipalities could do it at any time. The municipal comprehensive review is no longer defined or even referenced in the new provincial planning statement. And applicants, private applicants as well, can also submit applications now to expand a boundary that we have to consider. So that's one significant change that's and I should also note that the criteria, all the very specific criteria that had to be met is now like has looser wording that we shall consider this rather than like we have to actually justify it. So again, some of that flexibility. There's some new policies in regards to density targets. We're encouraged to do it. It's not required. They have a new term on fast and large and fast growing municipalities, and there's 29 municipalities identified in the provincial planning statement that fall into that category. We're not one of them. And they have additional encouraging policies where they're actually laying out density targets that they want those municipalities to follow. So not an impact for us, but a big change for some of those other municipalities. And let's see. Other changes, so employment is probably one of the more significant changes that's happened and again, similar to the settlement area boundaries, converting in like employment land, which we have identified in our official plan, specific employment areas that have a number of protections in them through the provincial planning statement. You can only convert employment lands to another land use only during an official plan comprehensive review. Which is no longer required. And again, we can now consider those at any time. Applicants can also come forward and make applications to do those conversions at any time as well. One of the biggest changes, and they made this to they changed the definition in the Planning Act of what employment areas was, maybe about a year and a half ago, but it didn't come into effect. It's coming into effect on October 20th, similar to when the PPS comes into effect. And it's changed the way we look at employment areas. So now it specifically says that lands that are uses that are excluded are institutional and commercial, including retail and office not associated with employment uses. So, in like Logan Stephens Business Park, we do permit offices, and it specifically says as well, that they have it's businesses that include manufacturing, research and development in connection with manufacturing, warehousing, good movements, and only retail and office that's associated with that. So it's much more specific and less flexible. And then the PPS also requires municipalities to now review your employment areas based on this change. So just like initially from what we know, the business park, the business park, for example, permits a number of uses in our zoning and so on that we cannot meet that definition of employment area. Whereas, the Taylor Kid Industrial Park is kind of more in line with that. So it's, so I think what we're going to be seeing is a lot of business parks, which, do have some of those mixed uses that start to appear in them. Will almost be able to be permitted more and additional uses can go in those, unless we want to, tighten up our policy framework and make that an employment area. So again, that will have to be done as part of the official plan comprehensive review. Infrastructure, if municipalities are to consider now opportunities to allocate and reallocate any and use water and sewer capacity to meet any current and future housing needs. So this is something, the township is already looking to do through a capacity allocation policy, which is being worked on with our environment division. That's set to come forward to the November global meeting. Where council can provide some direction on that, and it is intended to it will have policies in there about that are going to be consistent with this provincial policy statement on how we can reallocate sewer and water capacity. Agriculture is another one that's kind of flip-flopped around throughout the various drafts of this PPS. In addition, the first rounds of drafts were allowing for 2 additional residences to be submitted on these are your prime agricultural areas, so not the rural lands. These are your lands we have designated that typically have your class 1 to 3 high fertile soils, and they were allowing those additional dwelling units to also be severed. which completely, was a complete reverse course on restrictive residential severance policies in prime agricultural areas. Again, there were a lot of criticism to those initial drafts, particularly by a lot of the farming associations that came forward on that, and that has now been reversed in the final version. So they are still proposing that you can have 2 additional residences. One of them could be, within the dwelling, the second unit within the primary dwelling, and then you could have like a detached house, for example. But they cannot be separate anymore. So they have to be as part of the farm thing. So that has been changed. And I know as part of our last official plan review, we did add policies to already allow that in agricultural areas as well as the rural areas. So our official plan is actually very consistent with that policy, and it will be implemented through the zoning bylaw, which we're undertaking right now. On-farm diversified uses, this appeared in the previous version of the TPS, the 2021. And essentially these are uses that they allow in prime agricultural areas to help farmers supplement their income. So this can be, various like agritourism uses, like when people do like corn mazes or farm stands or different things like this that they can, or they could make a small retail store on their farm property to sell cheese or anything like that. But the province is, as part of this new PPS, they specifically clarified that energy generation, transmission, and energy storage systems, so basically battery storage, those battery storage systems are considered to be an on-farm diversified use. So previously, we generally would not support those in prime agricultural areas, and the PPS is now saying that we want. Cultural heritage, the new PPS, continues to have requirements to protect heritage properties and to conserve them. But when they define protected heritage properties, it specifically excludes properties on the interest list. So these are our properties in the township, I believe, has 41 or 42 on our heritage registry where they're not designated properties, but we have flagged them and they're protected from demolition. Unless you have a property owner would have 60 days to make a request, so we would have time to decide whether to designate the property or not. And so this change in removing that from the cultural heritage policies aligns with recent changes that were made to the Ontario Heritage Act, which will remove basically our properties on our interest list are all going to be removed as of January 2026. We have an opportunity to designate them if we want. But that's why you're seeing there's a lot of municipalities all over the place now that are trying to ramp up designations, particularly in municipalities like City of Hamilton that I think have hundreds of properties on their interest list. So overall, those are, I mean, there's lots of changes. Those would be the biggest ones that I would say that impact us. The province, they're just finishing up consultation on whether there needs to be transition provisions. So they typically consider that. So municipalities can give comments on certain files that they may have ongoing. So there could be, applications, planning applications that may be right before the Ontario Land Tribunal that now wouldn't be consistent with the PPS or almost ready to go for a recommendation, and now staff couldn't support it. So they generally try not to, prevent those applications from continuing. So they're, they should be releasing transition provisions soon. Whether that will have an impact on or not on us, I'm not sure at this point because they haven't released them. But going forward, I can say the county of Livingston Huntington, they're currently doing an official plan review right now. So they've held off on it because they were waiting for this provincial planning statement to come forward. That will now be, they will now have their plan consistent with it. So then when we do our official plan review, which is set for 2026, we will then be consistent, we will do ours to be consistent with the county as well as the new provincial planning statement. Set to come into effect October 20th. And as of that date, all decisions have to be consistent with it, planning decisions. So our next October 22nd council meeting, we're going to have 2 planning recommendations coming forward, and they are being reviewed against the new provincial planning statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A lot of information. Councilor Clark, do you have a question?
Your worship, just thank you for the report. Just the finance projections in terms of regional level forecasts. Am I to assume our region is Lennox and Addington?
Yeah, I believe the city of Kingston's even caught into that as well.
And you're all thinking, through the mayor again, just a second. So the battery, I'll use that as an example for farm diversification. So the way I read it is if the prime farmland is being farmed, it's not, you can't just drop a battery plant or whatever in there. It has to be actually being operated.
Yeah, the primary use would have to get, as our operation.
And go through the same process, council through all the different things before that was approved. Like I'm just reading it, is that saying you can do it without council?
No, through your worship, just because the provincial policy statement allows for something, like our zoning bylaw and our official plans have not caught up with that. So, if someone proposed a battery storage system, we look to our zoning bylaw, it wouldn't be permitted in the prime agricultural zone. So they would have to get a zoning bylaw amendment. But if it met the criteria of PPS, essentially we would be supporting the zoning bylaw amendment because it is consistent with the provincial planning statement.
You see a hand over here, Deputy Mayor, or then I'll come back to those.
Not for the first time, so probably I've kind of stolen the question a little bit, except mine is a little more granular. So in the report, it says, renewable energy projects to proceed in prime agricultural areas as long as agriculture is the primary use of the property. What does that actually look like in metrics? It wasn't clear to me in reading the big document. That seemed vague. Like it's like if you have 100 acres, it's like, well, if you have a little garden, is that considered, agricultural use? Like what's the metric to measure whether the property is still being used for agriculture?
Yes, through your worship, the prime agricultural uses is a specifically defined term in the provincial planning statement. So it outlines like whether it includes uses such as maple syrup production, the growing of crops, the raising of animals for food. It's got a number of different uses that are specifically listed. So it would have to fit into those categories. We're just having a vacant agricultural property in it.
Right, I get that, but no specific ratio in terms of actual geographic metric on the property.
That's correct.
That's what.
So something that is very different here than what we've been hearing from IESOs, they're preparing their next RFP for energy procurement. We've been told all along at all of the public engagements that wind generation was not going to be allowed on agricultural land. So that has now gone away.
Through your worship, actually, the IESO has prohibited solar farms on prime agricultural land. They have not prohibited wind turbines on prime agricultural land. Their last proposal was that if they want you to avoid it, and if you can't, you have to do an agricultural impact assessment as part of their criteria that they're putting on the municipality to review and say whether it's appropriate or not, and you provide those comments.
So where this says energy generation, solar would be energy generation.
Yes.
So
Yeah, in the solar, not in wind, but yes, I agree with you for solar, it is contradicting the solar requirement that they've released. So the final RFP, I'm interested to see with IESO, what's going to come out of that.
the expansion of 7 and 3, I'm concerned that private applications can go in, so that, my worry is that developers are gonna be deciding how big Odessa is and how big Bath is and how big Amherst-View is. Are we, because of this policy, are we required to approve those private applications? Or, I'm just thinking, we've got an Amherst-View as secondary plan, that we've identified lands that would be developed and lands that would be developed for future. could the owner of that then now come to us and force us to include that in our plan? And are we required, if a private application comes in and is successful, are we then required to provide infrastructure to that land? Or is it still going to be bound by where we have water, sewer, and infrastructure available?
Through your worship, yeah, like our official plan and the way our settlement area boundaries are defined it's interesting because the whole entire secondary plan area is within the urban settlement area boundary. We just have policies dictating that it has to be done by a secondary plan, and we're putting lands available that work within the timeframe for infrastructure expansion and so on. We could, even today, without this, if someone wanted to make an application for the rest of the lands, we would have to be able to consider it. Does not mean that we have to support it if it doesn't make sense in terms of infrastructure and expansion and all the other pieces that we consider for planning. In regards to the actual settlement area boundaries, these would be our like pure rural lands that are outside of belonging. So if someone came forward and submitted that application, we would have to accept it and review it and bring it before council. But I can say, my recommendation would be, that we not support that because I can confirm we have sufficient land supply well beyond the 20-year mark within our urban boundary. There's other areas in the township in AMSU particularly, that are already within the boundary defined as future development areas that can expand and move up and move even beyond once we need those lands to come in. And those are within the boundary today. So going even further than that and leapfrogging out that far, planning recommendation that I would.
No thanks.
Just a follow up that question. So our current official plan aligns with what timelines? There's capacity for what
Through you, it's planned for 20, but in reality, it's like the way the growth thought and what was there, it's definitely beyond. So we aligned ours with the county's official plan and what they defined as our settlement area boundaries. So to be honest, we have an oversupply within our current growth boundaries.
I'm just wondering, thinking about this new process where it seems like ad hoc landowners can bring forward expansion of the settlement boundary. Do we deal with those ad hoc, or is there any advantage to taking advantage of this new flexibility of up to 30 years instead of doing it proactively? And is that something to consider?
Yes, through definitely that I can say that even though the commercial planning statement has removed the comprehensive review requirement, we would still do that. So as part of our official plan comprehensive review, we do updated employment and population projections and look at our land supply every time we do that review cycle. So if it was flagged that there's for certain settlement areas, like say this is completely built out and we have then we're getting close to it, then then that's when we would start to evaluate whether we need to add some more additional lands based on updated employment and population projections. So we would do that as part of that.
Any other questions for clarification? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion. Mr. Wells.
I move to receive the report with thanks to staff for presenting it so fully with absolutely no notice. So thank you.
Received, so moved, seconded by Deputy Martin. Any comments from the mover? Seconded.
I'm just very glad, my thanks to staff again for presenting this. I'm sure I'm just glad and confident in our planning staff, very confident that they will appropriately interpret these changes to the provincial planning statement to ensure that we're well protected against these opportunities.
Any other comment? I do with that one, and again, thank you, and thank you for the barrage of questions that I've been sending in on this topic. All have been fully answered. And it's such a broad topic, and the full PPS covers more than just housing, so I'm looking at some other portions of it as well. For the other things I'm into, like TAPMO, and it can be mind-boggling when that's not important. Sure. So I like your comments about, you know, the mixed lands, the mixed use, that's all. I think that's a very good system for us to be able to try to develop within our township. Help develop the commercial as well as the housing, and rather than just, you know, remove the commercials, considering we don't have a lot here. And I guess when I'm reading this too, I guess I just have to say that that housing is needed. It's a very important concern in Ontario, that's the province or the country. I always just watch that when one item is so focused on, that all other items are still in consideration. And we've seen it in the past where sometimes they get focused on one issue and it kind of supersedes other concerns, and you can end up with a well-rounded community. And I'm still looking for that well-rounded community, that the industrial lands, to have it into commercial, everything that's needed within the community to be a self-sustaining community. So when I'm looking at it too, it's trying to understand, but it's also trying to understand the full picture of what we look like 20 years from now, 25 years from now. These new policies are played out on the ground. So with that, no further comments. Call question. All in favor? Motion is passed. It completes the consent. Announcements. Really good announcements this evening from the council. Yes.
Apologies. I would like to offer congratulations to the Henderson Recreation Committee who, after a 5-year drought, Recreation Association, pardon me, who after a 5-year drought, a pandemic, on Saturday hosted the first dance that's been held in the Island Community Center in many years, with continuing thanks to the staff who have helped make that happen. It's been so long, we had to have 2 bands. The dance started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, went till 11 o'clock with food trucks, and well attended by Old Islanders, new, some mainland people, all ages. It was a very fun event, and hopefully helped to fill the coffers that have been empty because they haven't been able to fundraise over that period of time. So they're also doing a full range of recreation programs on the island that are also being enjoyed. So congratulations to the committee.
Well done. Thank you. Any other announcements this evening? I just have a couple to touch on. One was last Friday. The township received a grant for the WJ Henderson from the RBC, and the staff put on a nice little presentation location right out in the WJ for RBC to come and present the township with a track check for $125,000. It will go towards part of the ventilation, the new ventilation system. So it's coming the right way. It's a great, really great asset, and it's going to certainly help with the project. The other is the Odessa Chili Fest was on Sunday. It was well attended. 17 chilies were in it. Well over 200 people attended. No real solid numbers because everyone will counter at the door, but it was well over 200, which is nice. We're going to get that 300 again post-COVID. So it was a good afternoon, a lot of fun, and 3 very good weekend. 3 prizes, and the rest, the jury will just enjoy by. So with that, that's it for announcements. We'll go to confirmatory bylaw. Deputy Mayor Town.
I move that bylaw 2024-90 to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Douglas Township be enacted and passed under the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign.
I looked over because I remember this. There you go. Seconded by Councilor Ennis. All in favor? Motion is. And a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. Councilor Willis, seconded by Councilor Thomas. All in favor? Motion is passed. We are adjourned at 6:55.